Hello, everybody. This is Jeanne-Marie Pinel from San Diego, and we are back with Simone for the Montessori show, the first of 2021. How are you, Simone?
I'm very well. Thank you so much, Jean-Marie. It's so nice to see you and everyone and be back with the Montessori show. And I'm so excited to get stuck into our topic for today.
Yes, definitely. And I know a lot of good questions came in, so that is wonderful. And I see some familiar names. So welcome, everybody. Let us know where you are joining us from, because it always is so beautiful to see how global this community is. So drop in the chat where you are joining us from. And I'm sorry, but I'm focusing on admitting people in the room. So I would love to start, Simone, with the fact that you not only attended, but you were also a presenter for the Association Montessori International USA refresher course. This is a refresher course that happens every single year for those who are who do have AMI diplomas. And they've always been wonderful to go to. This is where you get to connect with those you trained with your trainers, always learn something new. There's tracks for 3 days. And Simone, you did the parenting track with Junifa. How was that?
Oh, it was so much fun. It was a real honor because there's the AMI, which is one of the big training organizations, and there's the AMS, the American Montessori Society, and they're probably the two big ones. And then to be asked and invited to present the parenting track, it was like an honor. So we put in a lot of work, but it was really fun because basically I loved the 4 planes of development lecture and study that we did when we did our training. And we only just scratched the surface. So it was great to like crack out the books and really read detailed information and prepare a rich presentation. And actually it wasn't really a presentation because we did not want to lecture for 6 hours to parents. So we made it really interactive and really got the parents' brains activated. And at the beginning of like the 3rd session, we said, okay, we're going to play an association word game. And we're like, if you hear the word first plane, what does that mean? And they were putting in the chat, and we're like, see, this is working, you know, they're really like understand the characteristics of each plane. And now they're going to understand their children better. So maybe it's actually not a bad idea to explain to people who maybe don't know what the 4 planes of development are.
Yes, and I would love for you to, do that. But before you start, I know you said you kind of went back to your theory albums and everything, and with now your what 15 plus years of being in the classroom working with children, were there like kind of ahas of going back and diving deeper into the theory?
I think, well, definitely, because also I've now got 2 children who are in the 4th plane. They're 20 and Emma's going to be 19. So it's also reflecting on my children through those ages. I had the guidelines, but it's just like, yeah, that kind of does make sense in hindsight. But one of the things I really found fun is my daughter's just been accepted into her university study that she'll start in September. And when I was reading up on university, the 4th plane, what Dr. Montessori wrote about, she really admired what medieval ages used to do for university study, where they used to philosophize and debate and like do political debates and things like that. And the study that my daughter's chosen is very much like a Montessori style university study, where she was actually saying that most of the university studies now are just an extension of school, where it's again top-down learning, the lecturer just stands at the front. So it really was like, that really resonates now. That was one thing that really jumped out at me from going back and reading. Actually, I've got it right here. If anyone wants to know more about the 2nd, 3rd and 4th planes, the book From Childhood to Adolescence, it's not so thick. It's written by Dr. Montessori herself, and it's quite accessible. So I don't often recommend Dr. Montessori's writing because it can get really hard and really you don't know how to apply it. But in this instant, I was enjoying it. So I thought I'm going to recommend it more.
Good. Yes. Well, why don't you, before we go into people's questions, why don't you do a review? What is this 4 planes of development that we talk about in Montessori?
well, would it be fun to even get people on the call to let us know what they already know about it? So I can, while you do that, I'm going to just say hello to a few people who dropped their names in the chat. So if you know what the 4 planes of development are, pop it in the chat. See, let us know what you already know, and we will then give you we can't go into it in depth. We did a 6-hour presentation and we want to get to all your questions, but I'll do a 5-minute summary so that you can have that overview as well.
And then if you do know, let us know what plane of development your child is in as well. If you know what they are, then okay. So
we'll say hello to Amy in Austin, and Candice in Portugal, and Denise in Rosemary Beach, Florida, Tochi in Vienna, Austria, Michaela in Paris. Hi to everyone. I love his international audience. We always get Mariana from Toronto. In Greece, I'm sorry, my Greek is not so good. I can't read my Greek writing.
And I see that there's an Amy in Austin. I just want to say I hope everything is better because Austin was having a hard time there a few days ago. So hope everything is doing well. You've got power, you've got water, you've got heat, food, all of that. Switzerland, South Korea, wonderful. Richmond, Canada. So my daughter is 8 years old. What plane of development is that?
Okay, well, no one was brave enough to write in the chat what they knew about the planes of development. So I'll give you a quick overview. And basically, Dr. Montessori recognized that there were characteristics, similarities in children of certain ages together. So from 0 to 6, they have similarities, from 6 to 12, 12 to 18, and 18 to 24. And these are years old, not months old. Yeah. So when you have a 0 to 6-year-old child, they're in the absorbent mind phase. So maybe you've heard that term where they pick things up, like we say, like a sponge, you know, everything that's in their environment without exclusion, the good and the bad. So I always say it's an enormous opportunity and also an enormous responsibility, because you can teach them all of the names and the vocabularies. You can be really rich. They're keen to learn and touch, and they're sensorial learners in this stage. So everything around them, they're experiencing through all of their senses, from smell to touch, hearing, tasting, especially in that first year.
That's why they put everything in their mouth, right?
Everything in them. So, for example, Isabella has 2 children in the first plane who are 1 and 4 years old, and Sandra has a daughter who's just turned 2, so they're also first plane. Tamara said she's learning about the planes, still not confident, but to give a summary, I have 2 in the first plane, yes. And Saranya from Indiana has a 2.5-year-old, so they're also in the first plane. So you probably recognize some of those things, the absorbent mind and the sensorial learner. Let's just stick with those for today. And one more thing, independence. So independence also looks different in each of the planes of development, and they're trying to work on the actual physical independence, how they dress themselves, that they're separate from you, that kind of thing. And then they move into the second plane. That's from 6 to 12 years old. And it's like you have a new child. There's this quote, development is a series of rebirths. And so sometimes they get to 6 and they start like talking back to you, and they're part of mental independence. They want to start thinking for themselves, and they're also really busy with morals. So like before, things were just black and white. What they were told, you know, is right and wrong. They get that. But all of a sudden there's these grays, like, oh, why do they, are they allowed to eat dinner watching the TV and we're not allowed to do that? And just all those kind of like, oh, I thought the rule was the same for everyone. And now I see that there's lots of grays in there. It could be about religion, lots of different things like that. And also they need a lot more space. They do big work. They're very strong. One thing about the first plane is they're very volatile. They're changing a lot in that time. And in the second plane, they're a bit more stable. So I think that's one nice thing for parents to know, is it's a bit more of a stable period, and their mental energy is amazing. So actually plant all of the seeds right then in the second plane, because they want to find out everything about the world and the universe, and not just what's in front of them, but they can understand continents and things far beyond them and the universe. And then they move into the third plane of adolescence. And this is a parallel plane to the first plane. It's very volatile, lots of physical and psychological changes are happening. And from mental independence, we're moving to social independence. And this was how we changed then as a parent. How do we support them to give them space, but also to still be their rock for them to come back to, and to support them as they go through the physical and psychological changes. And then into the fourth plane, where they maybe go off to study, or they go and volunteer, or they choose to take a year off and travel. and lots of things like that as they start to give back to society, work out what their meaning is, what they're going to do in the bigger picture. So they're becoming economically independent as well as an independent person, citizen of the world. So that is like a 5-minute summary.
Very brief. And I will say that, how Simone said that it's 6 years. Within those 6 years, there's also, it kind of looks like peaks and valleys, where it is also, 3 years to get to the peak, and then 3 years. And it's really, at least for the first plane, it's really this real sense of development, and then really refining what they've acquired those first 3 years. And there are also physical differences within the planes as well, that especially that first plane, I think that's where we see the biggest changes, but then there are also changes along the way as well. So yes, that was wonderful. And I do have a graphic that we can probably share when we send out an email that kind of just shows and very briefly states, and I wish I had it in front of me, because there are also like phrases that are very particular to those planes, such as, let me do it. Then what is it? The second plane is, it's a lot of the whys, right? It's, why does this work like this? Why do you treat me this way? Then it's, how can I help? Then, it's involve me and things like that. So I will get that and share it with you later. So wonderful. So now you all know a bit more about the planes of development. And I was telling Simone that, yes, children have planes of development, but because we are their guides and their parents, we also go through these planes of development with them. I happen to be in the fourth plane, and I had a little bit of adjustment because, they're gone, and I'm home alone. I mean, I have my husband, but it was different. It was definitely an adjustment of having kind of this different purpose, right? I mean, I'm still there to support them intellectually and confidence, but they don't really need me all that much anymore, right? I have a daughter in Scotland. I have a son up the coast. I don't hear from them all that much. So, so it was definitely an adjustment that I really did not expect that it would affect me so much. I really, I had no idea, no preparation for that. So it was actually quite interesting for me.
I also think like the parent of a first plane child is much more physical, like work that you're doing, you're helping them to physically move and handle their body and get their food needs met and all those kind of things. And then it starts to move into more a mental support by the 6 to 12 and the 12 to 18 kind of stage, where they're wanting to be more independent. They're wanting to have more mental independence. So, but the conversations are amazing. I love the conversations that you get to have with Montessori children, because it's full of questions and like just open questions. I mean, I start from really like a really young age, which is like when they ask you, why is the sky blue? Like, that's a really good question. Why do you think? And we start to like think of ideas and how can we find that out? And not even just always looking up Google, but really like thinking, who could we ask? Where should we visit, like a museum or an observatory or something like this must know? And, really giving them hands-on experiences so that they always know, I don't know, let's find out.
Right. Very true.
Should we get into some of our questions?
Yes. Let me get the document in front of me.
I can also start with the one from Instagram too. What would you prefer?
Sure. You have the Instagram ones. I can't see those. So why don't you start with that?
Okay, well, we've covered Jamella's, which was what are the 4 planes? So that's good. And then Caitlin asks, my 12-month-old just dumps activities on the ground or chews them. How can I help? Would you like to start with that one?
So that is part of development, part of the first half of that first plane. They are, experimenting. And sometimes I think maybe there's too much on the shelf, that there's a little bit too much to activity, don't know what to choose, don't know what to focus on. So, that could be a sign or an observation that you can make to maybe reduce how much is on the shelf so that they can just, focus on one. But it's true that for the 0 to 3, I've only worked in the classroom with the 2.5 to 6, which by then they have this very conscious idea of, oh, the work is on the shelf. I take it off the shelf. I take it to a table or to a mat. I work on it. I clean it up and I put it back. The toddlers usually just stand at the shelf and work at the shelf, or sit down right in front of the shelf and work on the floor in front of it. So it's again, it's just, progress. It's just development. It's just being aware. So I
I
think
see a huge effect in my classes from the 12 months old who are in the baby class, and then they move around 14, 16 months into the toddler class. And there is so much exploring. That is their work right now, is exploration is a human tendency. And for them to be dumping and pulling things off, it's like, what does that sound like? And then it's also looking for the thing that's going to take their attention the most, and only having out what they're really working to master, so that they're not just emptying everything. Or that could be its own activity, fill up a basket, empty it out and put things back in. So looking at those kind of activities as well. So there's some people saying in the chat, Jean-Marie, that they recognize that they weren't prepared for the changes either with a third plane child. Kayla, hello to everyone jumping in as well.
And somebody is saying that whether my daughter is enjoying Scotland. She definitely is. She's very happy there. Had a little bit of adjustment with the different light, not having as much daylight as we do here in California. So that was quite an adjustment for her. But one thing I will say about the planes of development, to go back to it. So both my children are in the 4th plane, but yesterday and Tuesday, I ran some mentoring sessions because I'm doing this discipline challenge. And my daughter was my Zoom room moderator. And it was just so wonderful to be on the other side and have the support of your child. And she was so professional and just like, okay, Mom, I've got it, and was fielding all the questions. So, it was a new chapter in parenting. It was really wonderful.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's some practical questions that are coming in. Are you happy to do those?
Sure, whatever.
All planes. Lizzie asked, what's the best way to hang artwork for a 12-month-old so they don't tear or rip it down?
To hang it? I mean, to me, if they're, I don't know, what did I do? I did clothespins. I had a string with clothespins. I think I put it up higher so they weren't able to reach it. But I know in the classroom, I wasn't a big one for, putting up their artwork all the time. It was for them to keep and take home. But that to me is a sign also, if they are pulling it and ripping it, that they need an activity of ripping paper, right? It's an observation of it's a wonderful activity to rip up paper. So.
I think it's really interesting because someone once observed in my classroom that, in my book, it says have artwork at the child's height, except when they're at the ripping stage, where you might have it so that they can appreciate it, but they maybe can't reach it. So it is maybe slightly higher than their eye line at that very, very tactile. Because I think they mean artwork is in just have beauty and art in their space. So that's always something to keep in mind as well. The Montessori Factor asked, for toilet learning, how to help my toddler communicate before the pee and the poo and not after?
Well, sign language is always a wonderful thing. If you haven't been, you can always incorporate that in just showing. To me, it's also observation, because they're going to make, probably a little face, or they're going to, so you can, right there, you can say, oh, do you need, it's time to go. So you also be observing when that is happening, and help them, give them that language. And if they're not quite verbal yet, it's really sign language or pointing, or just, Toilet learning is a lot about repetition. So they're not going to get it right away. So it's really a lot about repetition, and find what works for you as well.
It is a process, right? So
It
that
is.
we're building skills. So it's great that they're, getting used to it, and the communicating will come. It usually takes a lot longer for them to take over the part to say, oh, my body's telling me that I need to go to the toilet. Now I'm going to the toilet. It's a process of, oh, I peed on the floor. Then what the process will be is, don't rush right now. You've got half an hour, if you like, to learn how to take off your trousers, how we wipe the floor, how we go and sit on the toilet to see if there's anything else that we need to do. And then gradually it will be the time when they start to get to the toilet first, but it's a process as well. So we don't have to rush that process. You can take them, like if you start to know what times they tend to go, you can actually offer the toilet, like it's time for the potty now, when they've finished their activity, not in the middle of an activity. They're never keen to do that. But that can also help, that you actually showing them success first, and then they will learn to communicate that as well.
So there, I just want to pick up on a comment that Andrea put in the chat, and she asked, are the planes of development exclusively Montessori? I would say no. I say that it is just Dr. Montessori's explanation of these different, moments of development in life. So no, it's not exclusive Montessori. It's just that it's Dr. Montessori who, put a word on it, and who put an explanation of what our children were going through from birth to 25 years of age. But no,
And just to say,
everybody, it's universal. Everybody goes through the planes of development. So everybody.
Exactly. It's just that she noticed it. And when we understand that the child goes through these phases, then it's not such a mystery. Why are they acting this way? And why when before they used to put their things away, and the external order of the second plane is not there anymore. They're not busy. So how can I get them to put their things away so that we live as a family, but it's not important to them anymore? And that comes down to the reasoning mind. They need to have a reason for it. So it's so fun when you get to dig into it. And I'm sure we'll be talking about
and it's true that within like within the Montessori circle, it's funny how when we talk about different situations or children, and go, oh yes, first plane, second plane, like it is kind of a jargon, but it's universal. Everybody, we all went through the planes, and all our children will be going through the planes. Whether they are, there is somebody that needs to be muted, but I can't find them. Okay, wonderful. So should I look at the questions that came in through our form as well? Are you done with the Instagram ones? Are there some more?
I will just say that we got so many questions from Instagram, from the form, and there's some coming in the chat. And what we'll do is we'll just do our best to take a selection from all of them. So let's go to the Google Sheet now, and we'll get some of the ones that came in before the call as well.
Okay. So wait, hold on. What is the Montessori method for dealing with grief, the loss of a loved grandparent with a 4-year-old? Are there a prescribed method of relaying what has happened? Would you like to speak on that? I mean, I have some ideas, but
we both can talk to it if you like. Yeah. I would just say that in Montessori, we're as honest as possible, and we give age-appropriate explanations. So we don't try and worry them, but we also are very honest, because if we say things like, oh, she's gone to sleep, then they might actually get worried about mummy and daddy going to sleep. So you have to be really careful about the words that you use, that she died, so we're very clear. And if you have religious beliefs about it, you can explain what your beliefs are. But you can also, like one parent was worried about saying anything, but you can also say, we don't really know. Some people think this and some people think that. So you don't have to have all the answers, because I don't know about you, but I don't have the answers. And it's okay to, when you don't know the answer, say, I don't know the answer, but we can find out.
Yes. And there's wonderful books and literature. And it's interesting because I actually lost my mother when my daughter was 4. So totally went through this. And my daughter was very, very affected by the loss of her grandmother. And it was about, first of all, being honest that you are sad as well, and that this is For me, I see it as part of the honoring of those who have left. Like the grief and the sadness is part of the love that we have for them, and it's a process. But for my daughter, I think it was just really important to listen to her. There were some wonderful stories about, people dying or animals dying, and that was just a part of it. And I did involve her also with, she was there, for example, at the celebration of life, and if she wanted to say something, she could, and all of that. So I think it's like, Simone says, it's just being real, being honest. This is life. And just like I've been at home births where there's 4-year-olds that are there watching their mom give birth to a sibling. That is life. That is the reality. So very important. Yeah.
There's a couple of questions in the chat that I'd love to answer as well.
Yes.
Asks about Montessori schools, and is it the same in all Montessori schools that you have? The Montessori school has children from 3 years old, attend the classroom 5 days a week for full days. Is this the same worldwide? And how do you both as guides find the workload for the younger students attending for 5 full days?
So I'm a big proponent to 5 days. Whether they're full or not depends on your child's nap. I would always tell parents, like, if your child is still napping, I would prefer that they nap at home. I think it's nicer for them, and I don't want you paying for the afternoon session if they're just going to be napping, right? But once they've forego that nap in the afternoon, they're completely ready for a full day. It is a beautiful time, the afternoon, at least, for the 3-4-year-old is a time when there are less children in the classroom, where there are, it's a little bit quieter. They have a little bit more access to the teachers. They can get into kind of bigger projects. So I'm a big proponent for the 5 days, just because it becomes part of the routine. It knows what to expect, as opposed to 2 days here, 3 days there. It just becomes a much nicer rhythm for them, and it gives you a wonderful break. So
I think it's not necessarily universal, because I know
no.
the that my children went to, they were at 5 days, but they did 5 half days when they were 3 and 4, and then when they were 5, they did the full day. They did extended day, and they thought they were very special. So it depends. I actually quite liked the half day because I could then spend the afternoon with them. But for people working, it's actually really hard to juggle the half days. But it's kind of like set up for the best for the child, and then I think the 5 days consistency, though, is very, very helpful. Definitely.
And that is actually the 5-day consistency is actually one of the requirements to be an AMI certified school, for example, because there's many, Montessori schools that will do, 2 days, 3 days, whatever. But if you want the AMI certification, you have to do the 5 consecutive days.
And I love this question from Amo Bola. Please feel free to unmute yourself if I didn't say that correctly. They ask, what does Montessori extend to? I thought it was meant for children with special needs. And I love that, because Montessori is for all children with special needs or without. But it was started by Dr. Montessori in the slums of Rome. And she worked with children with, they called them defective children at that time, with psychological difficulties, children in orphanages, lots of different, difficult children. And then that's where she started her work. And then she wanted to see what would happen with, normal children. And it was amazing what she achieved. So Montessori is for all children, for all families, and even for all adults. I have a friend, Gabrielle. We used to always say, Montessori is not for every adult. But actually, adults can now learn Montessori and can all become Montessori adults. I loved that. I was like, yes, let's not say that it's not for everyone. It is.
And also to go further, Montessori, we work with families prenatally through until university age. So there is the whole parent education of preparing them for becoming a parent, the birth, prenatal, and all of that. And then there is, there are communities as early as 8 weeks all the way through adolescence. Yes.
Absolutely. There's lots of toileting questions, but I think we'll try and cover a range of topics, and we can come back to some of the toileting ones.
And the
that's okay.
toileting, I think we actually have a whole show dedicated to toileting, or you have a course even dedicated to toileting. So, okay.
I'll definitely look for the link to if we've done toileting. If not, we will do a toileting
Yes,
one.
yes. That is something that comes up a lot, I know. So here we have Katie. I recently added accessible space for my toddler in our kitchen, including a small table chair and kitchen tools. She loves climbing on the table to reach whatever she can. She also has been taking out the silverware to play with. Any tips for setting boundaries and limits? I've been redirecting her and using language like feet on the floor. I've also tried to provide her with other opportunities to climb, such as outside on the playground. So, Simone, would you like to speak to a toddler having a kitchen setup?
So I think that exactly what you're doing, it's having freedom within limits. So I don't tend to have knives and things available for young toddlers without supervision, so that I only bring them out when I'm going to be standing next to them. I don't think they have the self-control to be able to, not touch things. So what can they reach? Make sure that we're setting up as much of a yes space as possible, and then kindly and clearing saying, it looks like you'd like to work with, you look like if we're cutting and they look interested, it looks like you'd like to learn to cut. Would you like to cut the banana? And I'm going to cut the, more sharp things. And then they build up the skills. We have them alongside us. They start practicing with where they're at. I start with bananas and then move on to things like cucumbers. And then you've got great crinkle cutter knives that they can also use. And the actual setting limits part is just being very clear, like, yeah, I can't let you use that knife. It's too sharp. And it's okay. And they actually may have a meltdown. So I noticed that in some of the questions, people were saying, I might set a limit and then there's going to be a big explosion. They're not always really pleased with the limits that we set, but we are there to keep them safe. So Jean-Marie, I quote her all the time saying, it's our job to keep you safe. And I feel like that's such a great thing to say, because it's honest, it's clear, it takes responsibility. But I even could say that at all the planes of development, a 16-year-old who wants to go to a party and you're not comfortable with the situation, it's my job to keep you safe. Let me ask you some questions. All of the things. So it's really the same. Setting limits is a bit more collaborative as they get older, but it's definitely good practice right now in the toddler years, just to be kind and clear and to physically remove them if they're getting into trouble, and then looking at keeping your cupboard safe and things like that.
And when just the phrase, it's my job, I think also helps us not to take things so personally, that it's a reminder for us as well. Like, we're here to do our job, to keep you safe, to guide you and all this, because oftentimes, children is going to have a tantrum and meltdown. We tend to take it personally, but it's not, it has nothing to do with us. It's them that need our guidance. So it's a good reminder as well.
I've got a really good question here from Instagram that I'd like to read out, which is from Alex. It says, what can I do to support a child transitioning between the planes? They're 6 years old. And I love that question, because it's not just like at 6 years old, they move into the next plane. So one thing that we can say is that from like 5.5 to 6.5, it's a transition. You'll be seeing characteristics of the second plane as early as maybe 5.5, but then they really may not have made the full transition to the sensorial learning and that kind of thing until later. And they're always going to be sensorial learners. It's just so strong in that first plane. And also you notice transition moments from the first subplane that Jean-Marie was talking about, from 0 to 3 and then 3 to 6. And I see them starting as early as 2.5, but maybe not transitioning to that second subplane until they're 3.5. So
yeah, and for me, that transition it's a wonderful question, because it's also going for you to hone in on your observation skills, right? Because they are going to be dancing still between these two planes, and I saw it in the later part of the second plane where they're becoming adults and they're taking responsibilities, but they're still children. They still want a cuddle. They still need, so it's just, there's always going to be kind of a dance between the two. So be open to that. Like, like Simone says, it's not cut and dry. On your birthday, you're going to switch over and be a totally different person, but you're going to start noticing little differences that are going to increase with time.
one thing I really notice around the 6-year-old mark is that they really want to have more responsibility. And so in a free world, it would be wonderful to be able to send them to the shops already and be able to buy the groceries. But instead, you could maybe, if you have a small store and that they've been to with that they've been with you to a lot and they know where the pasta is that you're having for dinner, you could send them in with the shopping list that they've written, and they would have the money ready, and you're standing at the door in case, and maybe the shopkeeper already knows you, and you can build up skills that way, because this going out is actually really important. That they really want to bake something, they might then write the ingredients, and you just basically become the chaperone between 6 to 12, and you let them have as much responsibility as you like. And I love the idea of like letting them get on the wrong bus, but you're still there, but then they'll work out, oh, they forgot to get off at the stop, or that they're going the wrong direction, because you have to learn. You have to do it once, and then you will never do it again. Actually, I have a funny story that my daughter was on a train to Germany, and it was one of those splitting trains. So she ended up a couple of stops too far and then had to go back. And it was an hour of her life, and she will never do that again.
Right,
so
right.
When they're 18.
Yep. Yeah, I know for me here in the US, I think, people thought that I was parenting kind of bizarrely, because I just took my children on the bus ride from home to school. Just one morning we did it together, and then they were good. They were on their own. Every morning they took their bus on their own, and people in the neighborhood really thought I was, but they were so happy to be independent and to be able to do it. And yes, maybe they missed the stop once, but they never did it again. And they were so proud to tell their friends, like, oh no, I come to school on my own. I take the bus. I wasn't going to drive them every morning. I have other places to go. So yeah, definitely.
Do you want questions from the Google Sheet?
Yes, so this one is for you. How can I wean my 2.5-year-old from her pacifier in a Montessori way?
Ooh, fun. Yeah. I think with the 2.5-year-old, I would really start to discuss it with them. I don't like tricks and bribes, and Montessori doesn't appeal to that at all. But like, how can we work with you to say goodbye to it? And they're going to really be attached to it. But you may actually find that you're more attached to it than they are, but it becomes more difficult after 2, that it becomes almost part of their body schema. Like, it depends also how much they're using it. Are they using it just at bedtime? Is it during the day? So say it's all the time, then I would start to put it when they wake up. I would put it into a box, in the bedroom, that it stays and it's just for bedtime. That's getting rid of that. And then when they're frustrated and antsy, because they will be, because one thing about a dummy is it helps relax their nervous system. So I used to suck my thumb, and I remember when I was 5, I was still sucking my thumb, and I remembered I'd come home from preschool, grab my little dog toy, put the ear over my nose and start sucking. I could relax. And I know that, so that's what your baby or your toddler is going to be missing when they take that away. So what other ways can you find to relax their nervous system? And just doing this right now, like deep tissue, bear hugs, rubbing them with the towel after the bath, drinking yogurt through a straw. If you actually look at activities that help children who are highly sensitive and need to decompress, you can actually find a lot of activities there as well. So work on that. So there'll be a replacement activity. And then I often make an agreement, like on a certain day on the calendar, that that's the day that we're going to say goodbye to it, and then remove all of them from the house. And then you may have some teary days, but it usually doesn't last as long, and you are going to be kind and clear and understand, yeah, it's difficult. You really wanted your pacifier right now and it's gone.
Yeah. And just as a side note, it's true that like in the prenatal education and the infant education, we try to stay away from the pacifiers, really, because there isn't a need. I know for myself, for my children, they did not need it. I think once I tried to introduce it to my second, because he was having a hard time falling asleep, he spit it out, never wanted it. So I think we need to be really cognizant of that as well, that it is not it is not part of being an infant. Like, you don't have to have a pacifier. You really have to follow your child. Some need more extra sucking, but the way that we use it in Montessori is, for example, if you are breastfeeding and you see that your child needs a little bit more suction, it's just at that moment to kind of transition off of the breast, and then that's it. It's not part of their body scheme, like Simone said, because now at 2.5, it's just part of who they are. They need that in their mouth. So that was just a side note that we tend to just stay away from pacifiers altogether.
What I've noticed as well, though, is like when children come into my class and they have a pacifier in their mouth when they arrive, I say, oh, would it be okay if I just put your pacifier up here? And then the parent comes in 2 minutes later and it's already been put on there. It's actually sometimes the parent's more attached to it than the child is, I think. So that's something to keep in mind. Is this important for me or is it important for the child? So.
And I think it's also cultural, you know, because I see, like, when I go back to France, I am always just shocked at how many children and older children have pacifiers. You know, they're in a stroller with a pacifier, and I'm kind of, you know, I've always told Simone I'm going to come around with a little ticket and give people tickets, like, oh, excuse me, like, but you know, people do what they know, and that's it.
We're all doing our best. That's all I can say.
Exactly.
We have a pacifier, it's okay, and it's been what's been working, and now you're making the decision to let it go, and I'm sure, hope it will go as smoothly as I say.
Exactly. And definitely talking to your child, doing it together is important, especially at 2.5. So yes.
I just had an idea. Like usually as well, people ask advice about breastfeeding and weaning, like an older toddler who's breastfeeding, and you can do the same thing too. You can make it like, say, you know, in 2 weeks we're going to end breastfeeding, if it's not already happened with the child, you know, weaning themselves, and then you celebrate that, like, it's been such a special time of us, you know, breastfeeding together, and let's celebrate it, have a little party, whatever. So you could do the same for the pacifier. It's been such a friend, wasn't it? It was so helpful when we were just feeling like we just wanted to relax. We put out our pacifier. Thank you, pacifier party. Bye. Okay. Sorry, that was just a quick aside. I actually really love this question in the chat because it's something we've not spoken about before, which is my 4-year-old daughter has a phase now that she wants to be like everyone else. For example, have blonde hair, play with everyone. I try to explain that everyone is born a certain way, but she seems really sad. Any suggestions?
Wow, that's a good one. I think this is going to be, you know, helping her observe what everybody, all the difference. And I think this is where also, you know, having diversity in the books that you have, with all of the different skin colors and genders and disabilities and all of that being represented, because I think that's where, you know, they're in a silo and they want to resemble. So definitely through books, through pictures, through, you know, seeing how everybody is different at school. And if they're not different at school, then yeah, I don't know, you need to consider going somewhere else. No, I don't know. How would you deal with that, Simone? Because I think that's a really anti-bias education for young children. Yes.
Okay, so I'm working through it with a friend, and we just take and we read a chapter every month, and it's all about the 4 goals of anti-bias education. And the first goal of anti-bias education is to, like, accept ourselves, because if we accept ourselves, then we can accept others. So I think that you would love this book because it really talks about celebrating the child. And then the second goal is understanding others. So then they're starting to get to know, you know, diversity is a beautiful thing, and that where, you know, how you see differences. And then by the third goal is starting to recognize when there's injustice. And the fourth goal is what you can do about it. So it's really simple structure. It was written in the 80s, and it's just information that we should have all had in our parent handbooks and teacher handbooks, and I am loving it. It's really great. So I put the book in there too. And I think a lot of what Jean-Marie was saying is really listening to her, listening to her or him or them.
Her.
As they're upset, and to acknowledge how that must feel different, you know, because we don't want to push them and say, don't worry, you know, we're all fine. Everyone's different. You're like, yeah, you really wish you had blonde hair. Yeah. You really, and you just acknowledge it. And you could draw pictures. Oh, what if you look like this? And what if you look like this? And do you have different skin kind of color crayons that you could try out different skin tones? And how would your hair look like you know, if it was up and down, and make a game of exploring appearances and coming again to make sure that there's reflections of themselves in books and like Jean-Marie said.
But I love your point though of really the work starts with accepting who we are first, right? Like helping her just be really happy with who she is. Like, and that's, you know, unfortunate, but that it's happening so young, but that's, you know, the unfortunate, like what social media does to a lot of people is this whole comparison of like, oh, I don't look as good as her, or as skinny as her, or don't have, you know, the house or the shelves or all this. And it's becoming a real issue for our youth, and I think for everybody's mental health. So being really cognizant of that and really doing work of the self-love and the self-acceptance is truly very important. So very good point. I have a question for you, Simone, about dealing with aggression. In the early toddler age, 14-month-old, not wanting to engage in activities, throwing, yelling, clinginess. And this is from the Google form. Reina.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, because that would be a lot of work if you felt like they're being really aggressive to everything. I would go back to looking at the human tendencies, and we have human tendencies to explore, to communicate, you know, and for the first plane child, those two out of all of the others would be like the most important. So how can we make sure that they're exploring without us having to interfere all the time? How can they communicate, and we show them and we model in a respectful way how we communicate, because they're not having their needs met. That's the vibe that I'm kind of getting.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, they're aggressive, and the same kind of approach as to the child who doesn't accept themselves is like, you sound really frustrated about that. Yeah, you were really trying to put it in. It didn't go in at all. And I just sit with that. I don't try and fix it. I could maybe say, like, once they've calmed down, like, would you like me to show you? And then I might model it. Or some children will let you give instructions, other children won't, and they're just going to persevere until it goes in. If they're throwing their toys a lot, we also, what Jean-Marie was saying earlier, are there too many toys? Are they the toys that are meeting their needs right now? So it's really hard as a parent when you've not been working with children for 15 years to know what their needs are and how I'm going to proceed to meet. But like, do you notice that they're like pushing things along? Okay, well then maybe I'll get some vehicles. And are they lining all things up? Oh, let me have things that they can line up. Or do they start sorting those by color? Oh, what, maybe I could have some sorting activities. So you're looking for patterns. If they liked one puzzle, maybe have a similar puzzle but a little bit more difficult. Or yeah, so an object, like there's usually something that they love. And if it's animals, then you can provide lots of different activities that meet lots of different needs around animals. So it could be that they have a farm, so they can, you know, practice putting the animals in and out of the farm. It could be that you have books about farm, then you're doing lots of language. Then you could have some simple crayons and things where they're drawing pictures, and maybe it's just a sheep that looks like that, you know, because that's what they can kind of draw. And then you might have a puzzle that has some farm animals. So you're looking for the thing that might keep them most interested. But because I don't have the question in front of me, did I even answer?
You did a little, you did. And I would just also reiterate that the importance of getting outside. 14 months is big movement, gross development. So if they've, you know, are walking, like spend hours outside of just exploring, you know, preferably out in nature where there's, you know, rocks and logs and things. Like for me, that is oftentimes when a child is, you know, aggression to me is a way of communicating, I'm frustrated, I need more. And that at that age, they're just all about movement. So let's go on long walks, let's go exploring outside. And you know, if they're not interested in the activities, well, they're not interested in the activities. Let's follow them. Let's, you know, let's go out as much as possible. So, and I think that will resolve itself.
I've got a question here from Alice May as well. She asked, where can I find good information about the age 6? I can't read the rest of it, but I think I would again refer back to this one, which is From Childhood to Adolescence. It talks about the second plane quite a lot. There's not that many books. There's the Child of the World, I think it is, Susan Stevenson's book.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which covers that plane. And Juniper and I are writing a book, but that won't come out till 2020.
And if you are on Facebook, there is a great group led by Pilar, who is, I think it's the second plane something, but it's very supportive of for parents of second plane children, and she also has like a whole kind of timeline for activities for second plane children. But I know that that group is very supportive, and there's a lot of Montessori educators in there kind of helping parents along as well.
I'm dropping a couple of Instagram accounts as well.
That's the one, mainly Montessori. She's the one that's running that the second plane one.
Nicole Kavanagh has a child who's in the second plane, so that she's often posting about some of the bigger things that are going on. Midwest Montessori as well, with her children.
I think her eldest, Charlotte, is probably second plane, yes. So there's a question here on the Google form asking about fearing of missing something, as if we're focused on one aspect of our child's development and we might be missing something else. So the question is kind of long, but that's the gist of it. Is I know every child is different, but you want to offer them all different types of activities so they don't miss on anything. Going through everything. So basically she's, to sum it up, is there a list of skills, knowledge, experience for a Montessori child depending on the age and ability? Yes, there is. Simone has done a great one. She has a great book that
age of the child. Mine goes up, my list goes up to 4 years old, but I can definitely drop the, I'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah. And to me, I think we need to be careful though with these lists and wanting to check off the list, because remember, this is about following our child. This is about following this very individual, special, unique person. And so, yes, those can be helpful in guidance, in ideas for you. But what is most important is observation, in seeing what it is that they're gravitating towards, seeing what it is that they're focusing on, interested in, and that's what you give them. Because what it comes down to is, Montessori really believed that we're born with really this intrinsic need to learn and to adapt. And children have shown us that they know what they need to learn. They know what they want to master. So we need to follow their lead as opposed to wanting to check off a list.
Absolutely. And that's the downside of the list. But the list can just give you some ideas as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, what to offer a 15-month-old, and you can try some a little bit earlier and a little bit later, and you might get lucky. But this actually reads really nicely into maybe one of our last questions. It goes so fast. Jess asked, what is something you do differently now from when you first became trained in Montessori? Oh, I love that.
Oh, wow. So I know for myself, I actually trained to be a Montessori teacher when my children were already 8 and 4, right? So it's kind of my life's little regret of, oh, I wish I had done this before. And I know that that's what drives a lot of the work that I do to really empower parents to know all of this information, when their children are not yet born and when they're young and everything. What I think really, and I think that I did this a little bit kind of instinctually before, but it really kind of gave me even more permission to do it, is really this notion of following, and really this notion of they're different. I just have 2 children, but they're so different. And just the way that they progress through life. Yes, they had the same universal milestones, but they just did it differently. And the bigger aspect too is this real notion of the environment, of really how you can empower them through the environment. And a perfect example I remember is my 4-year-old at the time. We have breakfast together. We pour milk into a bowl of cereal. But here in the US, it's a big jug. It's a big gallon jug, which can be pretty heavy and cumbersome. And he was so determined. He really wanted to pour his own milk, but it would spill. And I remember his father getting, upset that, oh, yet again a spill. And I went, wait a minute. Went and got a little, jug, a little creamer, put enough milk in there, set it next to him, and woof, it was like, I can do this myself. So that was just a real eye opener, that whole, environment, and how to really empower them through the environment, and how it is our job to adapt the environment for them. Now, that's a great question. Love it.
I would say something quite different is that when I finished my Montessori training, I had practiced all of the activities, and I really would walk up to a child and say, here, let's do button framing. Use the button frame. It's late here. I've had a whole day of meetings. Let's use the button frame. And then 50% of the time, the child would walk away, and sometimes the child would indulge me while I gave a lesson. But working with toddlers, it's very different. You don't come up with a lesson plan for the child. You work where the child is at. So I had to go through that process of having those humbling moments to really step back and to wait until I had that moment to step in. And it's like you practice the activities and the presentation so much so that you can step in and know just the tiniest thing you need to show them. And what if I just moved the zipper this way, and then they can open the rest of it for themselves? So it's a lot more subtle. I think that I went from, I wanted to show them everything, to I'm just going to show them the one thing that's going to get them further right now. And that was huge. That was quite a 10 years work, actually.
And you did your Montessori training before having children?
And Oliver was 3 and Emma was 1. Yeah.
Okay. So still in the first plane. Okay.
Yeah. Wonderful. And actually, Emma had much more the benefit of the Montessori approach, though. Oliver, I was trying to entertain him, and too much. Yeah, it's really great, because now I can empathize with all the parents who want to make changes. And all I can say is it's possible, but you just have to learn a new language. This wasn't the way that I was brought up. I read How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and listened so kids will talk, and hung up pages of that in my kitchen cupboards to say, oh yeah, they did say good job. What can I say instead of good job? Okay, let's try those instead. And it really fits so nicely with parenting and Montessori parenting. Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. And we're always learning. We're always evolving. And I think that is the privilege of being a parent, is that we get to evolve our parenting from how we were parented, and hopefully our children will evolve, and so on and so forth. We just do our very best and keep on going, right?
Sorry that we didn't get to all of the questions that were sent in and that were in the chat. That just means that we have to do this again soon. So will you all come back and hang out with us again?
Yes.
We'll definitely send you the recording. We'll send you a link to the archives, because we've been doing this for 4 years. So yes, those toileting questions have been answered before, and we will continue to answer as many as we can. A big thumbs up for yes, and yes, please. Great. And Jean-Marie, is there anything that's coming up? Oh, you're actually in the middle of your positive discipline challenge. Is it still going?
So yes, I've been on Instagram sharing kind of some positive discipline tools that for me kind of change my life, and in the classroom as well as parents. So that's on Instagram at my handle, Jeanne-Marie Penel. And then I will be actually Saturday, I'm opening the doors to my parenting school. So this is a 5-week course where I mentor you through it every week. And it's really about Montessori, positive discipline, our home environment, understanding development and such. So it's a dive deep for 5 weeks, and I'm super excited. The doors are opening actually tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow is Saturday. So
can we have a pre-link? Can you send it to me and I'll put it in the...
Definitely. Yes.
You got it here first.
And actually, before I forget, I do have an early bird special where if you sign up before March 2nd, I'm giving $100 off for everybody who signs up and pays in full. So I will definitely share that link with you.
Amazing.
Yes.
All right. I have not much news. We're in lockdown at the moment. I'm missing all of the children in my classes. It's lovely to see many familiar faces in here. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we will continue to keep you updated with when we'll be back for the next show, probably in a quarter, like 3 months, that kind of thing, not a quarter of an hour. We can't wait to see you all. Keep bringing Montessori into your homes, spreading peace and positivity one family at a time. And we'll see you again soon.
Yes.
You
Thank you all.
say goodbye, and thank you for all the beautiful messages in the chat.
Yes. Thank you.